Hi, my name's Harlan. I only asked one thing that night. Did they not hold my baby while they were drunk? I said it calmly. I said it respectfully. And right there, in front of them, my wife turned to me, eyes blazing, and slapped me so hard my vision blurred. Her parents didn't even flinch. They just stood there, grinning like they'd finally broken me. But what none of them knew is that 15 minutes later, something would happen. Something so shocking, so undeniable, it cracked their power in half and exposed the truth they'd buried for years. So let me ask you, what would you do if the people you called family were the ones quietly planning to take your child from you? Because that night, I found out they already had the paperwork ready. The late-day heat in suburban Dallas lingered in the air as we stepped through the side gate into Serena's parents' backyard. It was the kind of Saturday evening where neighbors lingered outdoors and music drifted across fences, but the Hale household always had a different tone to it, loud enough to draw attention, sharp enough to keep you in your place. I pushed the stroller over the uneven bricks while Serena walked ahead, already slipping into the rhythm of her family's world. Their conversations rolled over each other like waves. I felt that familiar shift where I went from being her husband to being the outsider who was expected to smile and blend in. Dalton raised his beer in a lazy greeting. He was a big man, rosy across the cheeks, voice always a little too loud once he'd had a few. Marjorie stood beside him with a drink of her own, her eyes scanning me the way someone might look at a passing inconvenience. The baby stirred, and I gently rocked the stroller, hoping he'd settle again. Before I even said hello, the comfort cloth he always held slipped out and fell to the ground. I bent to pick it up, brushed off a bit of grass, and made sure it was tucked under his leg. No one noticed. They never did. People moved around the yard carrying plates and bottles, laughing too loudly, bumping into one another. Serena blended right in, like she'd never left. I'd always wondered how she shifted so seamlessly back into this version of herself, the one who didn't mind the sharp comments or the way her parents controlled the mood of every gathering. I tried to ignore the tight feeling working its way up my chest. I'd grown up the youngest son, the one everyone teased for being too soft, the one who got talked over before finishing a sentence. Years later, it seemed I'd married into a place that expected me to play that role all over again. When Dalton wandered closer, I caught the uneven edges of his steps. His drink had been refilled more than once. Marjorie topped off her glass while chatting with a cousin, never looking toward the stroller. I didn't want trouble. I didn't want a scene. I just wanted my little boy safe. I kept reminding myself to breathe before speaking, to choose a tone that wouldn't spark anything. Living long enough as the person everyone assumes won't object makes you overly careful with your words. A relative I barely knew clapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're always calm, Harlan. Bet you won't mind if the baby gets passed around a bit." He meant it as a joke. People always did. I forced a small smile, but inside something twisted because I knew they weren't really joking. They genuinely believed I wouldn't say a word, that I'd stand there and let anything happen as long as it kept the peace. Being underestimated used to roll off me. Lately, it felt heavier. I noticed Dalton drifting closer to the stroller again, his fingers tapping the rim of his bottle as he leaned in. Instinct made me inch forward. "Let's hold off a minute," I said, keeping my tone steady. "Maybe grab some water. He's a little restless today." Marjorie didn't bother hiding her expression. She smirked at Serena, a small, private look that carried more meaning than words. Serena glanced at me with irritation, like I'd embarrassed her just by caring. A few people nearby heard the exchange and chuckled softly, as though I was exaggerating, being dramatic, overprotective. Lester, Serena's older brother, muttered, "Come on, man, it's family. Relax." It was amazing, really, how quickly a group could make you feel cornered with just a tone, a look, a breath held too long. But I wasn't trying to make rules for anyone. I wasn't trying to control the moment. I just didn't want my son in unsteady arms. So I tried again. Firm, calm, still polite. "I'd prefer no one hold him while drinking. Please." The shift in the yard was immediate. Conversation didn't stop, but it stumbled. A quietness crept in around us. The kind that makes your skin prickle because you know you've stepped outside the role people expect you to play. Serena turned on me with a speed that made my stomach drop. "Shut up! Who do you think you are to tell my parents anything?" Her voice cut through the yard. Before I could even take a breath, her hand struck my face. It wasn't the sting that stunned me. It was the shock of being slapped by the person I trusted most, in front of people who already viewed me as less. I tasted the silence that followed. It was thicker than anything I'd ever felt. A couple of guests looked away, pretending they hadn't witnessed it. Others watched openly. Dalton didn't even blink. Marjorie folded her arms with a satisfied tilt of her chin, as if I'd finally shown my true place in their family. I froze. Not a dramatic pause. Just a moment where everything inside me went still. I looked at Serena, and for the first time since I met her, I couldn't recognize the woman in front of me. The baby stirred from the sudden noise, and I reached down to steady the stroller. No one else made a move toward him. No one even glanced his way. Something shifted inside me then. Not anger, not yet. More like the beginning of a realization. An awareness that this moment wasn't isolated. It was the surface of something much deeper. Something that had been building for years without me naming it. As I steadied myself, Serena's expression flickered. Not with guilt. Something else. Her eyes darted past me, and for a split second she looked uneasy, almost startled. I didn't know what had caught her attention, but I could feel the air change. As the sting on my cheek faded, Serena's eyes flicked to something behind me. Her face, which just moments ago was twisted in indignation, suddenly paled. Her mouth parted slightly, but no words came out. I turned slowly to see what had interrupted her fury. Mrs. Donnelly, our next-door neighbor, was walking up the path toward the patio. She wasn't a regular at these gatherings, though she had lived across the fence from the Hale family for over a decade. She held her phone in one hand and wore a look I hadn't seen on her before, worried, unsettled. The chatter around us dropped. You could feel it. The sound of people pretending not to listen while every ear tuned in. Mrs. Donnelly stopped a few feet away, eyes flicking briefly to Serena, then settling on me. "Harlan," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "I'm sorry to interrupt, but may I speak with you? Alone, if possible." A few relatives snorted under their breath. Marjorie made a face like someone had just walked in with muddy shoes. Dalton didn't move, just sipped from his beer and shook his head slightly. Serena stepped forward, her voice brittle. "Why him? What does he have to do with anything?" I felt a calm I couldn't quite explain rising up inside me. Maybe it was the slap, maybe the years of being brushed aside. Either way, I said, "Because she asked for me." Clear, simple, no apologies. It was the first time I had ever spoken like that in this house. Lester, half sitting on a cooler nearby, narrowed his eyes. "You good, Harlan?" he muttered, Not like he cared, more like he was testing me. I didn't answer. I followed Mrs. Donnelly down the path toward the side gate. My hands were still trembling, but something about leaving their stares behind, even for a few steps, made it easier to breathe. She stopped beside the tall wooden fence and turned her phone screen toward me. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, she began, but after what I just saw, I couldn't let it go. The video was from her security camera, time-stamped just 15 minutes ago. The footage showed the Hale backyard from an angle I recognized, facing the patio and the grass where the baby's stroller had been parked. Dalton was in the frame, swaying slightly, holding his drink with one hand as he bent toward the stroller. I wasn't in the shot. I remembered. That was when I'd gone inside for a clean diaper. He reached in, trying to lift the baby. The baby flailed slightly, not comfortable. Dalton stumbled, catching himself, but not before the baby slipped halfway from his arms. You could see the jolt, the twist of the tiny body, the panic in his face. Marjorie's voice chimed in from somewhere off-screen. "Just hold tighter, Dalton. You're fine." She laughed. The footage paused on the baby's face, his eyes wide, mouth open in a silent cry. My stomach dropped. I didn't realize I'd taken a step backward until I bumped into the fence. Guilt, thick and immediate, surged through me. I had left him out there. I had trusted them. I had walked away. But then something else rose, hotter, sharper. Anger. I looked up at Mrs. Donnelly. "Thank you for showing me." She gave me a sad smile. "I almost came over earlier. I saw the stumble on the footage, but thought, maybe I was reading into it. But when I saw what your wife did to you just now, I knew something wasn't right." I swallowed hard. She added softly, "You're the only one I've seen who actually watches that child. The rest of them, they act like he's a prop." Her words cut deeper than she knew. I stood there for a moment, steadying myself. The fence creaked as the wind shifted. Inside the house, the laughter had started again, like nothing had happened. But something had. I turned and walked back to the patio. Serena spotted me before I reached the steps. She moved toward me fast, her voice sharp. "What lies did she tell you?" I stopped. "She didn't lie." Dalton barked out a dismissive laugh. "Come on now. Just a little wobble. You're overreacting, son." That word, son, landed differently this time. It didn't feel like family. It felt like control. I stepped onto the patio. "I need to talk to Serena, privately." Serena crossed her arms. "If you've got something to say, say it here. We don't do secrets in this family." Behind her, heads turned. A few people stood, clearly ready for another spectacle. I saw the smirk return to Marjorie's face. Lester nudged someone beside him. I looked at Serena, then at the baby sleeping again in the stroller. Then I looked at all of them. "You put our child in danger," I said, voice even, and hid it. "All of you." The silence that followed wasn't polite. It was stunned. Serena blinked at me like she didn't recognize the man standing in front of her. Maybe she didn't. Dalton opened his mouth but said nothing. Marjorie took a slow sip from her glass, but the tightness in her jaw betrayed her. "You're making a fool of yourself," she finally said. But this time, she didn't sound so sure. I turned toward her. For the first time, I saw it, the flicker of worry, not about the baby, not about me, but about appearances, about what the neighbors saw, about what might unravel if one thread was pulled too far. Something in me settled. That steadiness stayed with me as we left the barbecue. The baby was asleep in the back seat, head tilted slightly, one hand gripping his little comfort cloth. Serena sat rigidly beside me, eyes locked on her phone, thumbs tapping furiously at a screen I couldn't see. She didn't say a word the entire drive. I didn't either. Not because I didn't have words, but because for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. The roads were quiet. The golden light from the street lamps flickered across the windshield as I turned into our neighborhood. The closer we got to the house, the heavier the silence became. We pulled into the driveway. Serena yanked her purse from the floorboard and walked inside ahead of me without waiting. The door didn't quite slam behind her, but the sound was sharp enough to make the baby stir. I unbuckled him slowly, careful not to wake him, and carried him in. The house felt still in a strange way, like it was holding its breath. Serena's footsteps stomped down the hallway. Then came the thud of the bedroom door shutting hard, but not quite slamming. It was always like that with her. Just enough anger to prove a point. Not enough to take responsibility for it. I stayed in the living room. The baby let out a soft breath against my chest, the edge of the comfort cloth tucked under his chin. The smell of smoke from the barbecue lingered faintly on my shirt. Charcoal, cheap beer, and overcooked ribs. I stood there a moment, rocking slightly, feeling more like a shield than a father. Then I sat down on the couch, careful not to jostle him. The cushions dipped beneath us, familiar and worn. The living room was dark except for the porch light streaming through the blinds. For a moment, all I could hear was the faint hum of the fridge and my son's breathing. It took me back. Not in a way I wanted. It just happened. I remembered sitting like this, small and quiet, pressed between the arm of a worn-out sofa and my older brother's elbow. I must have been 7, maybe 8. One of them had shoved me hard off a swing earlier that day. I'd scraped my arm and cried, more from the embarrassment than the pain. When I told my dad, he didn't look up from his paper, just said, "Don't start trouble. They're just playing." And that was that. My brothers laughed it off. I remember thinking, even back then, if this is playing, why does it hurt? That feeling, that you were wrong for feeling anything, it followed me into adulthood, like a shadow. The baby whimpered in his sleep. It was small, barely a sound, but something in the way he tensed made my chest tighten. It was the same look I'd seen in the footage earlier. That flash of fear, pure and instinctive. And then the memory cracked open wider. I saw myself again, but younger, maybe 5. My brothers had been tossing me between them like a pillow, rough hands grabbing under my arms, swinging me too high. I'd cried out, not from fun, but from fear. And my dad, watching from the porch, had called out, "Relax, son. They're just having fun." But it wasn't fun. And now I saw it, clear as day. The way adults refuse to see fear when it got in the way of their comfort. How they downplayed it, laughed over it, or labeled it drama. I looked down at my son's face, peaceful again, the edge of the cloth still pressed to his cheek. I brushed it lightly, my voice no more than a whisper. "I won't let that happen to you." And I meant it. Something inside me shifted then, like an old foundation finally cracking open. All my life, I'd been trained to keep things smooth, to keep the peace, to step aside. But that version of me, he hadn't protected me, and he wouldn't protect my son either. Serena came back into the room. She didn't look at me, just crossed her arms and said sharply, "Do you have any idea how bad you made us look tonight?" I didn't respond right away. I kept rocking gently. "You embarrassed me," she snapped. I looked up. Her eyes were still blazing, but beneath it, I saw something else, something uncertain. Our son was in danger, I said, calm and clear. Oh, come on, he was fine. Nothing even happened. You're so dramatic, Harlan. You always have been. Those words hit me harder than I expected. You're dramatic. You always have been. They didn't just come from her. They came from every adult who'd ignored me as a kid, every person who made me second-guess my gut, every time I was told to stop making a fuss. I saw it now. Gaslighting. That's what it was. Emotional sleight of hand meant to make me doubt what I'd seen, what I felt. But I didn't feel small this time. I didn't retreat. I saw the footage, I said, still steady. She blinked. For a second, her mouth opened like she might argue, but she didn't. You're blowing it out of proportion, she finally muttered, turning away. I saw it, I said again. Just those 3 words. And it was enough. She turned on her heel and marched back down the hall, slamming the bedroom door this time. I stayed there in the quiet, just me and the baby. I shifted him gently in my arms, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. The smell of baby lotion and faint smoke made for a strange mix, but it felt real. Something was different now. I wasn't holding my breath, waiting for her to come back out and explain herself, or worse, pretend nothing happened. I didn't need her validation. Not anymore. My phone buzzed on the side table. I reached over and grabbed it. A message from an unknown number. You need to know what else happened today. Beneath it was a link, a video file. My hands trembled as I tapped the screen, realizing this might reveal more than I was prepared to face. The moment my finger touched the screen, a quiet tremor ran through me. I didn't know what I was about to see, only that whatever waited inside that file would change something I couldn't afford to ignore anymore. The living room was dim, the only light coming from the hallway nightlight and the glow of my phone. My son was asleep in his crib, the cloth tucked under his hand just the way he liked it. Serena hadn't left the bedroom since slamming the door. The video loaded slowly, the spinning icon dragging longer than usual. When the first frame finally appeared, I steadied my breath, expecting another angle of the porch footage. It wasn't. This view came from the opposite side of our yard, from a neighbor whose house sat slightly higher on the incline. Their camera must have caught a wider portion of the Hale backyard. The image was crisp, the late afternoon sun hitting everything in a harsh glow. The timestamp showed exactly 15 minutes before Serena slapped me. I saw Dalton in the frame, wobbling a little as he stood near the patio steps. Serena was next to him, one arm extended as she shifted our son toward him. Even on the small screen, I could see the baby twisting, uncomfortable, whining in that way he did when he felt unsafe. Serena's voice cut through the footage. Just hold him. It's not that hard. Dalton mumbled something unintelligible, his grip already slipping. The baby's legs jerked as his body tilted, and Dalton lurched to compensate. A sharp gasp escaped me as I watched my son dangle at an angle no child should ever be held. Serena didn't reach for him. She looked annoyed. My chest tightened. I leaned closer to the screen. Then came the part that hollowed me out. Serena turned to her mother, frustration flooding her face. Harlan gets all worked up about nothing. He's like a scared little kid. Marjorie shook her head and replied, "He should be grateful we even let him be part of this family." I froze, not from surprise, no. It was the clarity that stunned me. The bare truth spoken so casually, as if I wasn't a husband or father, just some inconvenient burden they tolerated. Something inside me pulled tight, like a knot that had been forming for years and finally locked into place. The video continued. Marjorie took the baby next. She was swaying slightly, a drink still in her other hand. She shifted her weight too quickly, and the baby let out a startled cry. Instead of comforting him, she muttered, "Good grief, you're fine," and jostled him back into position. I swallowed hard and kept watching, even though every second hit like a blow. Then the part that sent me past my breaking point. Serena laughed and said, "If he gets a bruise, we'll just say Harlan tripped while holding him." Dalton chuckled. Marjorie smirked. Someone else off-screen added, "He's clumsy anyway." I couldn't even blink. The breath I tried to pull in didn't make it all the way down. They weren't just careless. This was a setup in waiting. A version of events planned out, rehearsed casually, ready if anything went wrong. They decided who the scapegoat would be. Me? And the worst part? They were confident I wouldn't fight it. Why would I? I never had before, not in their eyes. The video ended with Serena's voice. "He won't say anything. He never does." I let the phone drop to my lap. The room felt heavier than before, like the air had thickened. I sat there with my hands resting on my knees, staring straight ahead. The walls were quiet, but inside me, something was shifting, slow, controlled, permanent. They had crossed a line I didn't even realize existed until now. I stood, every step deliberate, not rushed, not frantic, just certain. I checked the baby, adjusted the blanket around him, and made sure the cloth stayed under his hand. His breathing was steady. That alone anchored me long enough to push forward. The hallway to the bedroom felt longer than usual, each footfall quiet on the carpet. Serena was sitting on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, shoulders tight. She didn't look up until I reached the doorway. "I saw everything," I said. She blinked, her face shifting, then settling into irritation. "What are you talking about now?" "You know exactly what I mean." Her phone vibrated. She glanced down. The color drained from her face as the preview of the same video lit up her screen. For the first time in a very long time, I saw something honest in her expression. Fear. Not the fear of being wrong. The fear of losing control. Her lips parted slightly. "Harlan," she whispered, my name sounding more like a plea than anything else. And I understood, in a way that I hadn't before, that the balance had tilted. This time, she wasn't the one holding the ground beneath us steady. She stepped back like she was preparing for a blow. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't afraid of the truth. She was afraid of losing control. I stood there, my legs slightly trembling but holding. Serena clutched her phone like it might anchor her to something solid. The bedroom was dead quiet, the kind of silence that didn't offer peace, only pressure. It felt like the room itself was waiting to see which one of us would break first. I spoke without raising my voice. "You let them treat me like I was nothing, and then you joined them." She didn't look at me, just stared past me, into the space over my shoulder, as if eye contact might make the words real. "It was a joke," she mumbled. "You're blowing it out of proportion. They didn't mean..." "They almost dropped our son," I cut in. My voice cracked but didn't rise. Twice. That landed. I could see it in the way her jaw clenched and her fingers tightened around the phone. She didn't speak. And for once, there was no quick sarcasm, no eye roll, no deflection. Just silence. Then, barely audible, she muttered, "My parents don't respect you because they think you're weak." I didn't move. couldn't. The words hit deeper than anything she'd thrown at me before, because this time they were true, not in the way her parents saw me, but in how she'd carried that belief alongside them. I didn't want them to turn on me too, she added, her voice catching, so I just went along with it. I sat down on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped slightly under my weight. I stared down at my palms, hands that had carried too much in silence. Memories flooded in uninvited. My father interrupting me mid-sentence, telling me to speak when you're sure. My brothers deciding where we went, what we did, while I trailed behind. The boss who assumed I'd take the late shift because I never said no. All I ever did was try to keep peace. I know, Serena whispered. That's why they take advantage. I looked up at her, still sitting rigid by the dresser. Her voice was small now. Honest, maybe, but late. She inhaled shakily, then said, "There's something else." Her eyes met mine, and I knew what was coming wasn't going to fix anything. My dad told me that if I ever chose your side over theirs, they'd cut me off. No more help, no more support. Everything inside me stilled. So that's what it was. Not just mockery, not just control, but leverage. Years of it. She hadn't been defending them blindly. She'd been protecting her own position, her financial safety, her place in their world. You knew they treated me like garbage, I said slowly, and you let it happen because you were afraid of losing, what? Their money? I didn't know how to stop it, she cried. I was scared. I nodded once, not in agreement, just acknowledgement. I understood the words. I even understood the fear. But that didn't make the betrayal any smaller. I stood again, walking a few steps toward the crib, my son's tiny hand still curled around the edge of that soft cloth. His breath moved in slow, even waves. You sacrificed me to keep them happy, I said, facing away from her now. She broke down then. Full sobs. Her hands covered her face. And for a split second, I saw not the woman who'd mocked me in secret, but the girl who'd never stood up to her father, never learned to draw a line between love and control. Part of me wanted to go to her, to say something soft, to smooth it over, the way I always had, maybe for the sake of our son, maybe because I still remembered who she used to be before all of this. But just as I was about to speak, her phone buzzed again. The tone was sharp, insistent. Serena looked at it through blurred eyes, and suddenly her expression shifted from sorrow to panic. I turned to her. What now? It's my mom, she said quietly. They're coming back. They want to clear the air. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Clear the air, I repeated. You mean rewrite the story, gaslight us both into pretending none of this happened. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Something inside me clicked, clean and final. Peace wasn't going to come from staying quiet. And if she couldn't, or wouldn't, protect our child from their influence, then I had to. I took one last look at the crib. The cloth had slipped from my son's hand, dangling from the rail like a flag. It was just a piece of fabric, but for some reason, it anchored me more than any conversation ever had. The knock at the front door came hard. 3 pounds, not a greeting, an announcement. They were here. Serena froze, looking at me like she expected the old Harlan to take over, to step back, let her lead, let her family take control again. But I didn't move backward. I took a step forward. When I pulled the door open, Dalton didn't even pretend to wait for an invitation. He walked in like he owned the place, brushing past me with that smug smirk still plastered across his face. Marjorie followed close behind, arms folded tightly, her gaze sweeping over the room like she was already cataloging what was wrong. Serena stood frozen a few feet behind me, her body angled slightly toward her parents, but her feet remained planted beside mine. That hesitation clung to the air, as thick and damp as a summer storm. From the nursery, I heard a faint rustle, the baby stirring. That sound alone steadied me. Dalton didn't waste time. "You embarrassed us tonight, boy, acting like you know better than your elders." I closed the door behind them, slowly, deliberately. "You were drunk," I said, turning to face him, "and you could have hurt my son." Marjorie scoffed as she tossed her purse on the entry table. "Our grandson is fine. You're being dramatic again." That word again, dramatic. It was always their go-to, dismissive and condescending, used to discredit everything that made them uncomfortable. I felt my shoulders straighten, my voice even. "You crossed a line." Dalton let out a dry laugh, pulled out his phone, and tapped the screen. "Want to talk about crossing lines?" he said, holding it up. The screen played a video, choppy and poorly lit, but unmistakably edited. It showed me, earlier that day, reaching for my son, except the clip had been cut right before Dalton nearly dropped him. The angle made it look like I was yanking him away too fast, too rough. "This is what people will see if you keep pushing," Marjorie said, stepping closer. "You want to protect your little reputation? Be careful how you play this." Serena gasped behind me. "Mom, what the hell is that? That's not what happened." Dalton smiled. "We protect our own. You're optional." The message was loud and clear. They were ready to lie, manipulate, destroy. Whatever it took to stay in control. My jaw tightened, but I didn't raise my voice. "You're not going to threaten me in my own home," I said, quiet but firm. Dalton's expression shifted. "You think you're the man of this house? Please. We raised Serena. We'll raise your boy better than you ever could." That one hit harder than I expected. The words were soaked in poison, wrapped in arrogance. My chest ached with fury, but I didn't flinch. "Dad, stop," Serena said, but her voice lacked conviction. She still hadn't chosen a side. Marjorie added, cold and sharp, "If she leaves you, we'll make sure she keeps full custody. Judges don't hand babies to men like you." There it was, their real intent. This wasn't just a disagreement, it was a campaign. And I wasn't just the opposition, I was disposable. I moved instinctively, stepping between them and the hallway that led to the nursery. "You will not go near my son," I said. The words came low and deliberate. Dalton laughed. "Or what? You'll cry about it again?" I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just watched him. And when he stepped forward to shove me aside like he always had, I didn't yield. His hand met my shoulder, but this time I stood my ground. I didn't shove him back. I didn't lash out. I placed my palm against his chest and pushed, controlled, measured, a warning. He stumbled back a step, surprised. I could see the confusion on his face. He didn't recognize me anymore. "Touch me again," I said, "and you're leaving this house right now." Marjorie gasped. "How dare you speak to us like that?" Dalton took a step forward, puffed up again. "You don't get to tell us where we can go. This is Serena's house, too." I glanced back at Serena. She was shaking. But this time, it wasn't just fear. I saw something else flickering in her eyes. "Dad, Mom, please, just stop." They ignored her completely. Marjorie's eyes narrowed on me, like I was the only obstacle between her and absolute control. That look was familiar. It was the same one she wore when she cut off people at the dinner table, when she corrected stories mid-sentence, when she reminded Serena who paid the bills. Something in Serena's posture changed. Harlan's not the enemy. That's what I saw begin to form behind her eyes. This ends now, I said. You're not staying here. You're not seeing our son. Not until you're sober and respectful. Marjorie's lips curled. You don't have the authority. I do, I cut her off. This is my home, and he's my son. Serena turned toward me then, really turned. For the first time in a long time, I felt her see me. Not the man she'd been told I was, not the dramatic husband or the weak father, but the man standing between danger and the child sleeping down the hall. Dalton jabbed a finger at me. You'll regret this. You don't know what game you just started. Marjorie shot Serena a sharp glance. The unspoken message was clear. You choose now. Are you one of us, or are you with him? Serena's breathing hitched. Her lips parted slightly, like she wanted to say something but couldn't yet find the words. The weight of everything they'd built, everything they'd twisted. It was all crashing into her at once. She whispered my name, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for her to save me. I had already chosen to save myself, and she stepped closer to me, just a small shift, but it sent a ripple through the room like a fault line cracking beneath our feet. Dalton's jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles twitch. His eyes narrowed, disbelief flashing before fury. So, this is how it is, Serena? He asked, voice low, laced with betrayal and warning. Marjorie stood stiff as stone, her arms folded tighter than before, her eyes locked on her daughter, not with confusion but calculation. She saw it before Dalton did. Their grip on Serena was slipping. Serena didn't answer. She didn't have to. Where she stood said enough. I stood still, no raised voice, no flinching. Just a man refusing to back down, no matter how many times he'd been told to sit quietly. I turned slightly, speaking only to her. You don't have to choose between them or me. Just choose what's right. For him. I nodded toward the hallway, toward the crib. Her eyes glistened. She looked down, swallowed hard. Then from behind me came the sneer. He's manipulating you, Marjorie spat. Dalton took a step forward, pulling his phone from his pocket. Maybe you forgot, he growled, eyes on me. I still have the footage, the one that makes you look like an unstable father. You push this any further, I'll make sure everyone sees it. Serena gasped. Dad, you wouldn't... Dalton's face twisted into something even uglier. Watch me. You'll come home where you belong when this little fantasy burns down. It was no bluff. He meant it. Serena's hands trembled at her sides. I could almost hear her thoughts racing, years of fear, of being silenced, trained to obey. But something in her gaze shifted when it drifted down that hallway. The baby made a soft noise, a whimper. She whispered, more to herself than anyone else, I'm not going back. Dalton's face turned a shade darker. His voice rose, rough and loud. You think you can just walk away from us? From everything we gave you? He raised a hand, his finger pointing toward Serena. I moved before I could think, standing between them, voice like steel. Don't you dare. She's my daughter, he roared. And she's my wife, I replied, teeth clenched. Not your property. A sharp cry pierced the room, the baby, now fully awake, calling out. As I stepped away to head toward the nursery, something soft brushed my foot. The comfort cloth. It had fallen from the crib rail, or maybe I dropped it when I moved. I bent down, fingers curling around the worn fabric. Then Dalton, still seething, stepped forward. His boot came down, right on it. He looked down at the cloth, then up at me, held my eyes, and pressed harder. It wasn't an accident. My fingers tightened around the cloth. It wasn't just a piece of fabric. It was safety. It was peace. And he crushed it like it meant nothing. I stood up slowly, held the cloth like it was sacred. You need to leave. Now. Dalton laughed. Loud, sharp, cruel. You think you can throw us out? You? You're still the same little coward, just louder now. I didn't answer. I breathed, deep, slow, steady. Yes, I said finally, because my son deserves better than this. Serena stepped beside me again. Her voice was shaking, but her words were clear. Dad, Mom, you're not welcome here. Not until you can treat Harlan with respect. Marjorie gasped like she'd been slapped. You ungrateful girl, Dalton shouted. After everything we've done for you. Serena flinched but didn't move. Her chin lifted slightly. I'm a mother now, she said, and I won't let my son grow up afraid of you. Dalton made a move, like he might try one last time to push past. I raised one hand, palm open. Don't, I said. My voice didn't shake. He stopped. Marjorie's hand closed around Dalton's arm. She felt it. This wasn't their house anymore. You'll regret this, Dalton muttered, pointing at me one last time. This isn't over. They turned. And for the first time, they didn't demand the last word. The door slammed behind them. Serena collapsed onto the couch, sobs spilling from her as the weight of everything came crashing down at once. I sat beside her, the cloth still in my hands, and held it loosely, like a tether to something steady. I knew this wasn't the end. It was a pause in a long, messy battle. She wiped her face, breath ragged. Then she turned to me. There's something else, she whispered. Something I haven't told you yet. I looked at her. What is it? Her lips trembled as she said the words that made my blood run cold. They've done this before, Serena whispered, her voice barely above the hum of the baby monitor. To someone else. The words hit like ice down my spine. I looked at her, really looked. She wasn't just scared anymore. She was unraveling and holding herself together in the same breath. To who? I asked, quietly, carefully. She blinked, staring somewhere far beyond the walls of our living room. My sister. When she left, everyone thought it was because she wanted to live her own life, rebel a little, but it wasn't that simple. I sat up straighter. I had heard mention of her older sister before, but never more than a passing comment, usually dismissed by Marjorie as the disappointment of the family. They tried to control her too, Serena continued, her fingers twisting into the fabric of the couch. Same as they did with me. Dad threatened to cut her off. Mom told her she was embarrassing the family. She begged me not to let them change who I was, but I didn't listen. I was too afraid. I felt a weight settle in my chest, heavier than anger, deeper than pity. This wasn't new. This was history repeating itself. And Serena had been walking a tightrope her entire life, balancing between fear and obedience. Where is she now? I asked. Serena's eyes dropped to her lap. She cut them off completely, changed her number, moved out of state. But before she left, she gave me a note. Said if I ever needed her, really needed her, I'd know how to reach her. The air in the room shifted. This wasn't just about tonight anymore. This was about a pattern of silence, of fear masked as loyalty. Then her phone buzzed on the table. Serena reached for it, slowly. The screen lit up. Private number. She stared, hesitated, then answered the message. Her hand flew to her mouth. She saw it, she said, eyes wide. The full video, the real one. Someone sent it to her. I moved closer. What did she say? She's coming. She said, I saw what they did tonight. I'm on my way. My mind raced. That meant someone else had the raw footage, the truth. Someone had seen what really happened when Dalton stumbled with our son in his arms. And they sent it to her sister, not to us. I stood up, something sharper than fear taking hold inside me. We show it, I said. We don't hide. If they push again, we take every second of that footage to court. Serena looked up at me like she was seeing me through a different lens. You'd really do that? I will. For him. For you. For all of us. And then, another knock at the door. Loud, heavy, familiar. My body tensed. Not again. But before I could move, another knock followed. Lighter, quicker, slightly offbeat. Serena inhaled sharply. That's her. She always knocked like that. Twice, quick. I crossed the room in 2 strides and opened the door. Dalton and Marjorie stood there. Dalton's face was red, jaw tight. Marjorie's eyes burned with fury, but standing between them was Serena's sister. Older, yes, but the resemblance was unmistakable. She held a folder in one hand, a USB drive in the other. Her mouth was a firm line, her stance unmoved. Dalton barked, You again? You've got no business here. Her voice was calm, cold. I have every right, and I'm done staying quiet while you keep ruining people. She stepped forward, brushing past them as if they weren't there at all. She handed the folder to me. In there, she said, are statements, reports, complaints, years of what they covered up. You're not just fighting them. You're exposing a pattern. My hands shook as I held it. I hadn't known it was this deep, this wide. Dalton lunged toward her, his hand half raised. I stepped in front, not flinching. Try it, I said, just once. He stopped, not because he feared me, but because he saw I wasn't the man he thought I was. Not anymore. Marjorie spat. This is family business. You don't air it out like dirty laundry. Her daughter turned on her, voice cutting. You did that all on your own, and it ends tonight. Serena moved to stand between them all. Her hands trembled, but her voice didn't. You don't get to control me anymore, or Harlan, or our son. You don't get to twist the truth or pretend any of this is normal. It's not. Dalton's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Marjorie's face turned pale. I turned to them, lifting the folder. You set foot here again, I said. This goes public. Every word, every frame, every witness. Dalton looked at me, really looked. And for once, I didn't see a man in control. I saw a man cornered, beaten, not by violence, but by truth. Without another word, he turned. Marjorie followed. The door slammed, hard. Serena's sister turned the lock behind them. It was quiet, except for the baby, whimpering again. Serena collapsed into my arms, her tears hot against my chest. Years of grief, fear, guilt, spilling out all at once. I rose, walked down the hall, picked up my son. He clung to me, his small hands gripping tight, not knowing what happened, only that something big had changed. I held him close. The fight might have ended, but healing, that would take time. By morning, the house felt different. Quieter, sure, but not empty. It was a kind of quiet that held breath, not tension. For the first time in what felt like years, the silence wasn't waiting for something bad to happen. It was just still and hours. I'd barely slept. The baby had woken once around 4, crying softly from the bedroom. I held him against my chest, pacing the living room in slow, steady steps. Serena lay curled up on the couch, her sister dozing nearby, both wrapped in throw blankets like they were clinging to what little comfort the night had offered. I moved into the kitchen, the baby snug in one arm, and started the coffee pot. The smell filled the space like a quiet signal that the worst was behind us. I stood there a while, one hand cupping the mug, the other keeping my son close, and let the warmth of it all settle over me. When Serena stirred, her face looked softer somehow, tired but lighter. She sat up slowly, rubbed her eyes, then looked at me like she wasn't sure if this was real. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for all the things I didn't see, for what I let happen to you." I knelt beside her, careful not to wake the baby. "We're here now," I said. "That's what matters." Her chin trembled. No sobbing, no dramatic collapse, just quiet breaking. That kind of emotional exhaustion that doesn't scream, it sighs. She shook her head, eyes glassy. "I was so scared of losing them, Harlan. I didn't realize I was losing you instead." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I reached for her hand and squeezed it. Across the room, her sister sat up, brushing hair from her face. "There's something else," she said, voice low. "Something I found in their files. You should see it." She handed me a sealed envelope. Inside, neatly folded, was a custody petition draft, paperwork Dalton and Marjorie had prepared. It claimed I was unstable, that Serena had expressed concerns about my parenting. It was dated 3 months before the incident on the porch. Serena read over my shoulder, her breath catching. They were going to take him. It wasn't anger that rose in me. It was something colder, something still. The realization that they hadn't reacted in a moment of heat. They'd planned, long before we stood our ground. Before anything had even gone wrong. They were preparing to rip him from us. At the kitchen table, the three of us sat in silence for a moment before Serena said what we were all thinking. "We need to protect our family. Legally." I nodded. "Restraining order first, then we document everything." Her sister leaned in. "I'll testify, and I know 2 others who'll back it up." This wasn't revenge. It wasn't about punishment. It was about boundaries, finally drawing the line in permanent ink. Later that morning, I took my son out back. The air was cool, the sun just beginning to rise over the fence line. He gripped the comfort cloth in one hand, sucking on it like it still held magic. Maybe it did. I looked down at him, the way his eyes blinked up at the world, unafraid. "You'll never grow up scared of anyone," I whispered. "Not while I'm here." Behind me, the sliding door creaked. Serena stepped out barefoot, arms crossed over her sweater. "I don't know if I'll ever heal completely," she said. "You don't have to," I told her. "Not all at once. Just don't try to do it alone." She nodded, and her sister joined us a moment later, resting her hand on Serena's shoulder. For the first time, the 3 of us felt like a family, not just tied by blood or marriage, but by something stronger, choice. By the end of that week, the restraining order had been filed. The evidence folder was scanned, copies sent to our lawyer. Dalton and Marjorie had no legal footing left, not after the statements, the witnesses, the video. No one showed up in court to fight it. They just backed off. There was no scene, no final scream, just quiet withdrawal. Weeks passed. Serena and I started therapy, together and individually. She worked through layers of guilt she hadn't even known she carried. I worked on finding my voice, one I'd spent a lifetime thinking didn't matter. We rearranged the living room, painted the nursery a warmer color, replaced the old photos on the hallway wall with ones we took ourselves, pictures where we were laughing, tired, real. The baby started to crawl, then pull himself up. His first tooth broke through while we were watching an old movie on a Sunday night. And the house? It stopped holding its breath. One evening, I stood in the doorway, watching Serena rock him gently in her arms. The comfort cloth lay folded on the side table, clean, worn at the edges. The sound of her humming filled the room, low and slow. I thought about everything we'd survived, everything we could have lost. We didn't just protect him, I said softly. We saved ourselves. Serena looked up. Her eyes shone, but not from sorrow, from peace. The storm didn't break us. It revealed who we were meant to become